Welcome, brave fools, to the gut-punching tale of the Silk Road, the most gloriously miserable trade route in history. Buckle up as we dive into the chaotic, sweaty, camel-scented truth behind its shimmering myth. Picture yourself as a wide-eyed merchant in a dusty 1260 town. The Silk Road has haunted your dreams like a catchy tune you can't shake. You've heard epic tales of caravans loaded with silky treasures, spices that smell like paradise, and enough gold to make your neighbors jealous. In your head, it's a magical highway linking civilizations, where ideas and riches flow under a starry desert sky. Spoiler alert, reality is about to slap you harder than a camel with a grudge. You've decided to dive into this long-distance trade circus. Maybe you're chasing fat profits, dreaming of selling Chinese silk in Europe for a fortune. Maybe you're an adrenaline junkie, craving lands straight out of a bard's fever dream. Or maybe you're just dodging something messy, a debt, a family scandal, or a wanted poster with your face on it. Whatever your excuse, you've signed up for the most dangerous, exhausting, wallet-draining road trip of the ancient world. You're rocking itchy wool clothes, baking under a desert sun, herding cranky camels, and traveling with a crew you really should have Googled before trusting. The year 1260 isn't just any year. It's peak Mongol empire stretching from China to Hungary under Genghis Khan's charming descendants. They call it the Pax Mongolica, which sounds like a chill yoga retreat, but actually means you're less likely to be shanked by random bandits and more likely to be taxed to death by organized ones with fancy seals. Trade is booming. The routes are mostly intact, and you poor soul, picked this moment to join a caravan with a stomach unprepared for fermented goat milk and zero diplomatic immunity. If you're picturing the Silk Road as a single majestic highway, think a Roman road on steroids stretching from Chang'an to Constantinople. Stop right there. It's not a road. It's a hot mess of a network, a tangle of side trails, crumbling mountain paths, and ever-shifting desert tracks sprawling over 4,000 miles, give or take, a few hundred depending on how often you get lost. Some routes loop north through the steppes, others dip south along Persia's edges. None are fun. All are out to get you. Maps are more like doodles. The weather is a serial killer, and every major turn relies on advice from a guy who swears he's been there once and now lives in a shack with no teeth. You're not going solo. That's a one-way ticket to becoming vulture chow. You'll join a caravan, a ragtag band of merchants' beasts, hired guards, translators, spiritual advisors, and probably some dude who coughs like he's auditioning for a plague. They say there's safety in numbers, but they forget to mention the shared diseases, petty theft culture clashes, and the near certainty someone's swiping your sandals while you snooze. Choose your travel buddies wisely. Easier said than done when most are strangers, and some will hate you the second you mispronounce their name. Cultural faux pas are the Silk Road's bread and butter. A harmless joke in one dialect might be a declaration of war in another. You won't know until someone chucks a rock at your head. Why are you doing this again? Oh, right, trade. You're hauling silk from China, spices from India, gold from the West, or maybe glass paper or anything valuable enough to justify risking your life on questionable kebabs. These luxury goods could fetch a fortune abroad, except when you arrive, the market's crashed, your spices are moldy, your glass is shattered, and your camel tripped. Because of course it did. Let's not get all starry-eyed here. Modern tales of the Silk Road love to skip the part where people died in droves. You're not Marco Polo. You're just a regular Joe who might not make it past Khotan. You're not forging grand east-west alliances. You're trying to turn a profit in a world that's actively plotting your demise through brutal terrain. Killer climates, diseases, politics, or just your knees giving out after 10-hour marches for 7 weeks straight. The Silk Road isn't a bridge between civilizations. It's a gauntlet, a dusty, disease-ridden relay race where the prize is not getting robbed in a language you don't understand. And don't expect 5-star inns. Sure, there are caravanserais, those roadside complexes offering basic shelter and safety. Think of them as medieval truck stops minus the charm or soap. They're rare, maybe one every 100 miles if you're lucky. Between them, you're camping under the stars, which sounds romantic. until a sandstorm fills your nostrils, your camel screams about wolves. The wolves show up and you realize your saffron stash is worth more than your life. Sweet dreams. The truth. You're stepping into a world that doesn't care if you win or even survive. The Silk Road chews up veterans, spits out rookies, and leaves behind bones and wildly exaggerated stories from survivors who'll never admit how much they sobbed on night 3 in the desert. But hey, maybe you'll defy the odds. Maybe you're clever cautious or just lucky enough to be mildly edible to whatever's prowling the mountains. You're here now. Your goods are packed. Your camel's giving you the stink eye. And your slow crawl into historical misery is just getting started. Before you can gloriously perish in the desert, you've got to pack for it. And oh boy, does the fun start here. Preparing for the Silk Road isn't just packing for a trip, it's packing for a buffet of suffering. Every item you pick needs to pull triple-duty trade value survival and not accidentally killing you in the process. That fancy silk bolt, it's also your sunshade. And depending on how the week goes, your funeral shroud. Those dried apricots, hopefully nutritious, possibly decorative, definitely melting into a fermented goo in your bag that you'll call wine when morale hits rock bottom. First up, animals. Camels are non-negotiable. Horses are too prissy for this terrain, and mules have the stamina of a baked potato. You need Bactrian camels, those two-humped grumps with bad attitudes, and the ability to survive on thorns and pure spite. Each can carry about 400 pounds, but you'd better balance the load like a tightrope walker. Too heavy and it'll stage a sit-down strike. Too light, and it'll spend the day chasing butterflies. Your camel is your lifeline, your ride, your mobile storage, and the only creature on this trip less thrilled than you. They also scream literal ear-splitting screams, often right in your face. You'll soon learn camel screams aren't just noise, they're a sophisticated language of complaints, each wail dripping with a unique shade of contempt for your existence. Next, your crew. Going solo is for people with a death wish and no heirs to their debts. You'll need a guide who knows the land, the languages, and which rivers are crawling with bandits posing as toll collectors. You'll also need translators, plural, because you're crossing a kaleidoscope of cultures and dialects. One wrong accent. And good morning becomes, I slept with your goat. Good luck climbing out of that diplomatic crater. You might want hired muscle too if your budget allows. Problem is, armed guys with nothing to lose tend to switch sides mid-trip usually to whoever's got deeper pockets or looser stabbing rules. Now the trade goods. What are you hauling? Merchant silk's always a hit if you can get it. Spices too, cinnamon, saffron, cloves, all lightweight valuable and guaranteed to leak into your socks. Gems are safe, assuming they're real, which they probably aren't. Paper porcelain tea, lapis lazuli. The list is endless and most of it's out of your league. Oh, and don't forget samples to flash along the way, because everyone wants to haggle without buying. You'll unpack and repack your goods so often you'll develop a permanent squat and the lower back of a 70-year-old dock worker. Then comes survival gear. Water skins, lots of them. Not because they're reliable, but because most will tear rot or vanish mysteriously between oases. Food, dried meat, flatbread raisins, maybe some barley for morale-crushing porridge. You'll also pack cooking pots, fire-starting tools, and spices not to impress your caravan buddies, but to make dried goat taste like anything other than regret. Don't forget spare shoes, needle and thread tent fabric, and enough rope for a makeshift pulley. A shelter, or if things get really bad, a noose. Medicine's a touchy subject. Options are scarce and mostly useless. You'll carry herbal concoctions, maybe some dried scorpion powder, if your apothecary's feeling creative, and a few charms blessed by whatever monks, priests, or holy randos you could find on short notice. You're not sure any of it works, but when your stomach starts doing cartwheels in the Gobi Desert, you'll pray to every deity you've ever heard of and chug anything that doesn't scream going down. Oh, and bribes. You'll need coins, copper for peasants, silver for gatekeepers, gold for guards who pretend not to notice you skipping quarantine. You'll also need small luxury items, glass beads, colored cloth, maybe a carved dagger. These aren't optional. Every town checkpoint and local warlord with an ego and a sword expects tribute. Skimp and you're detained, robbed, or enthusiastically beaten for disrespecting regional honor. You'll also need gifts for fellow merchants officials, even innkeepers. Never assume a deal's done just because you paid once. By now, your pack's groaning, your camel's plotting mutiny, and your wallet's sobbing. You've spent more prepping for this trip than you'll ever earn completing it. And you haven't even left. But it's too late to bail. Your goods are packed, your guide's annoyed, and your pride's bigger than your common sense. Could it really be that bad? You gaze at the horizon, an endless stretch of dirt and sky, and take a deep breath. It smells like dust, camel sweat, and distant dread. You climb onto your camel, secure your saddlebags, and signal the move. Ahead lie 1,000 ways to die. Behind lies a life you couldn't stand. Welcome to the journey. You've officially packed for the apocalypse. The sun's not even up, and your camel's already tried to bite you. Not playfully, not affectionately, just pure unfiltered malice wrapped in fur. You quickly learn that Bactrian camels, while the Silk Road's heavy lifters aren't grateful for the gig. They're cranky, stubborn, loud, and smell like someone fermented a rug in a vat of goat milk. They've got the emotional range of a soggy sock until you try loading them, at which point they unleash a sound somewhere between a scream and a dying chainsaw. Welcome to your new reality. Your camel hates you. And if you're honest, the feeling's starting to be mutual. Once your camel's done insulting your ancestors, you're off. A Silk Road caravan doesn't move like an army or a parade. It stumbles forward uneven and slow, like a drunk centipede held together by rope and anxiety. Your pace depends on the weakest animal, the worst terrain, and the most unpredictable weather. A good day means 20 to 25 miles of progress. A bad day means backtracking to dig a wheel out of a sinkhole, or waiting for a sandstorm to stop sandblasting your face. You travel in a group, but don't mistake it for camaraderie. The caravan's a shaky alliance of self-interested strangers, bound by mutual need and the vague threat of wolves. There are merchants like you, drivers, guides, cooks, translators, maybe a monk or two, hoping for safety in numbers. You eat apart. You sleep apart. You gossip together. The closest thing to unity is at mealtime, when everyone agrees the stew tastes like boot water. And someone should check if the cook's still trying. Navigation's a group exercise in guesswork. You follow stars at night and the bones of less fortunate travelers by day. If you're lucky, your guide's actually been here before and isn't just spouting confident nonsense like turn left at the big rock when there are 17 identical rocks in every direction. Maps exist, hand-drawn nightmares fueled by speculation and wishful thinking. You learn fast that most routes aren't designed for efficiency. They're designed to avoid the things that'll kill you slightly less quickly. The day's rhythm is a blend of monotony and low-grade terror. You wake before dawn, pack up coax your camel into motion, and trudge for hours through wind dust and temperatures that swing 40 degrees from morning to night. You try not to think too much. Thinking leads to noticing how your shoes are rubbing your feet raw, or how your lips are cracking like old parchment. You sing, maybe mutter prayers in 3 languages. Count the flies on the camel's butt in front of you. Anything to drown out the creeping realization that you're only on day 5 of what could be a 3-month slog. When the sun sets, you stop. Camp is a loose concept. Sometimes it's a sheltered spot by a stream. Sometimes it's just a rock that looks less murderous than the others. If you're lucky, you hit a caravanserai, a medieval rest stop built to house travelers, their animals, and the germs they're schlepping. These are big courtyards ringed with rooms. You might score a bed that's not dirt, a bowl of stew, and 3 conflicting stories about the same merchant's scar. Caravanserais are the Silk Road's social hubs where news goods and bacteria swap with equal enthusiasm. But even a caravanserai's relative safety doesn't guarantee rest. The walls might shield you from bandits, but not from the guy 2 mats over snoring like a dying bull, or the flea infestation, hitching a ride with the fur trader from the north. Some nights you lie awake listening to unfamiliar languages echo through the walls, wondering if that cough in the corner is just a cold, or something that'll end your career early. Eventually, you drift into sleep, not real sleep, but a flickering dreamlike state that passes for rest because you're too tired to argue with your biology. Then it's morning. Your back aches from sleeping on what felt like a sack of gravel. Your hands are swollen from gripping reins, and your camel's foaming at the mouth because you looked at it wrong. You choke down a breakfast that tastes like compressed sadness, check that no one stole your shoes, and drag yourself back into formation. The desert awaits. So do the mountains and storms. And the next town where the guards swear your perfectly legal cinnamon smells like contraband. This is the Silk Road's heartbeat, long stretches of silence, discomfort, and repetition, punctuated by bursts of fear or frustration. The road doesn't want to kill you quickly. It wants to wear you down, grinding your spirit into dust over endless trudging days and flea-bitten sleepless nights. And it's working. Your shoes are thinning. Your patience is fraying. Your camel's started making eye contact when it spits. This is your life now. Welcome to the journey. There's something uniquely terrifying about a place whose name roughly translates to go in and you're not coming out. The Taklamakan Desert doesn't bother with false advertising. No poetic metaphors or misleading travel brochures, just a sun-bleached graveyard of polished bones and terrible life choices. And now, thanks to your own spectacularly bad decision-making, you're about to waltz right into it. Your guide looks like he's seen a ghost. Your camel looks unimpressed. And you're already parched. Spanning over 130,000 square miles in what's now western China, the Taklamakan is one of the largest, driest, and most aggressively inhospitable deserts on Earth. It's a dead basin hemmed in by jagged mountains and haunted caravan legends. For Silk Road travelers, this is the ultimate gauntlet between oasis cities, a howling void of heat and silence, where the Earth offers nothing but regret. There are roots hugging the northern and southern edges, clinging desperately to oasis chains, like drunks to lampposts. But even those safe paths turn deadly if the wind shifts or your water runs dry, which it always does. The sand here isn't soft and picturesque. It's fine aggressive and everywhere. It sneaks into your ears, your eyes, your food, your very soul. It finds the tiniest gaps in your clothes and starts sanding your skin until you surrender. You spend most of your day squinting, blinking, and chewing sand that wasn't in your mouth an hour ago. Even when the wind isn't blowing, and it's always blowing, the heat radiates off the ground in shimmering waves, making every distant hill look like a mirage, and every mirage look like salvation. You start to suspect your camel's hallucinating too, because it just spent 10 minutes trudging toward a rock that doesn't exist. And then naturally there are the storms. Sandstorms in the Taklamakan don't come with a warning bell. They just show up like divine retribution for a god you forgot to bribe. The sky turns yellow, then gray, then brown, then vanishes entirely. The wind screams louder than your camel, which is saying something, and visibility drops to 0. You yank a scarf over your mouth and try to remember which way is forward. The sand slices your face like 1,000 tiny knives. Your caravan stumbles ahead in blind, slow-motion chaos. When the storm finally passes, you've lost feeling in your lips, one of your water skins, and probably your will to live. The Taklamakan's also a literal graveyard. Archaeologists have found eerily well-preserved mummies here, their bodies dried and half-buried by the arid air. While that's cool for scholars, it should terrify you. For every mummy in a museum, there are dozens more who didn't even get a proper burial left where they fell, because digging in this terrain is a waste of time and energy. Sometimes you spot bones scattered in the sand travelers who didn't make it to the next oasis, abandoned where they collapsed because no one had the strength to dig. If you're lucky, your caravan mutters a prayer and keeps moving. If you're unlucky, someone might loot your stuff before the sand does. To make things even cheerier, the Taklamakan's sprinkled with folklore. Ancient travelers spoke of spirits haunting the dunes, voices in the wind, calling your name, shadows glimpsed in the heat haze, strange lights dancing just out of reach. Are they hallucinations from dehydration and heat stroke? Probably, but it doesn't matter, because when you're staggering half-conscious under your backpack's weight, your brain happily supplies demons. Anything to explain that gnawing feeling something's watching you from just over the next ridge. And then there's the cold. Yes, cold. You thought a desert only burned, but the Taklamakan's generous with its cruelty. At night, the heat vanishes in minutes. The wind turns icy and your sweat freezes on your skin. You try to sleep wrapped in every scrap of fabric you own. Your teeth chatter, your joints ache from the day's punishment. You dream of river shade and baths only to wake with sand in your mouth and a camel snoring in your face. There's no relief, just mourning and more sand. You keep moving because you have no choice. The nearest water is days away. The last water tasted like copper and camel backwash. You've rationed your supplies so tightly even your raisins feel like a luxury. Each step feels heavier. Each breath scrapes your throat, and the horizon never seems closer. The desert stretches in every direction, featureless and uncaring. It doesn't hate you that would require emotion. The Taklamakan is simply indifferent, which is somehow worse. Then just when your last nerve is frayed, and your skin feels like it might peel off in strips, a speck of green appears on the horizon. An oasis, or maybe another cruel lie. But this one doesn't shimmer. It doesn't flicker. It holds. A patch of trees, a glint of water, a hint of life. You don't cheer. You don't even speak. You just adjust your pack prod your camel forward and keep trudging. Because even if you survive this crossing, you know, there are more deserts ahead, more trials, and more reminders that this road was never meant for you. It was meant for ghosts. When you finally reach the oasis, it's no desert paradise. The water tastes metallic and bitter. The palm trees are sparse and sickly, but it's life, and that's enough. You drink like you've never tasted water before. You sit in the shade and feel your body slowly remember how to be human. But even as you rest, you know it's temporary. The Taklamakan only lets you survive long enough to remember how bad it can get. This oasis is a pit stop, not a destination. And when you finally force yourself to leave the shade and hit the trail again, you carry the knowledge that the desert's still out there, waiting indifferent to your hopes and unbothered by your dreams. You've done what many couldn't. You've crossed the Taklamakan and lived to tell the tale. But it's not a story of triumph or heroism. It's about survival, plain and simple. And as you glance back at the fading dunes behind you, you know a part of you will always be out there buried in the sand, the wind, and the memory of a place never meant for humans. The desert taught you a lesson. You'll never forget. The Silk Road doesn't care about your dreams. It only cares if you're tough enough to keep going. And even if you are, it'll take more from you than you ever thought you could lose. When your caravan finally emerges from the desert's edge, you don't feel like a conqueror. You feel like a survivor. And on the Silk Road, that's probably the best you can hope for. You've staggered out of the desert, and for about 5 glorious minutes, you think life's looking up. You spot a few trees. You sip water that doesn't taste like a curse. Maybe you even find a blanket that doesn't reek of camel. But then your caravan turns toward the horizon, and all you see are mountains, jagged sky-piercing monsters draped in snow and disdain. Welcome to the Pamir's nicknamed the Roof of the World by some, and the place where breathing stops and regret begins by others. You're about to find out which name fits better. These mountains, along with their equally sadistic cousins, the vertical misery piles known as the Himalayas, Karakoram, and Tian Shan, are why the Silk Road doubles as a crash course in existential suffering. These aren't just obstacles, they're tests of your body, mind, and will to live. You'd think ancient trade routes would have found a way to detour around them. Nope, they go straight through. The paths are narrow, carved into sheer cliffs. Some turns are barely wide enough for a goat, let alone your oversized, sarcastic camel. The air's thinner than your odds of a smooth trip. Altitude sickness becomes your new best friend. It starts with a headache you can ignore. Then your stomach does a backflip. Your vision blurs. You try for a deep breath and get half a lungful. There's just not enough oxygen up here for human ego to function. Your muscles scream doing basic tasks like walking 5 feet or lifting a water skin. You're dizzy, but not the fun spinning in circles kind, more the I about to puke off a cliff kind. Your guide swears you'll adjust soon. He's lying, or he was born up here and forgot what human suffering feels like. The paths are treacherous even without the altitude. They crumble underfoot, shift with frost, or vanish entirely after landslides. Sometimes your caravan stops to clear a blockage. Sometimes it detours. Sometimes it stares at the mess, shrugs, and pushes forward anyway, assuming your goods are worth more than your spine. You shuffle along with your back pressed to the mountain, trying not to glance at the 100-foot drop between your toes and the jagged rocks below. You fail, and now you've unlocked vertigo. Congrats. You've leveled up to a new tier of anxiety. The weather's less a forecast and more a random punishment generator. It might be sunny at breakfast, hailing by lunch, and snowing before dusk. The wind slices through your clothes like they're optional. Your fingers go numb. Your nose turns red, then white, then nothing. You start fantasizing about fire not sitting by one, but being one. A warm, crackling flame instead of this shivering, frostbitten sack of misery inching toward the sky. At night, you find shelter wherever you can. Usually that means curling up against a rock wall, trembling under two thin blankets, trying to ignore the rhythmic crunch of frost forming on your boots. There's no wood for fuel. Your meal is cold, hard, and mostly theoretical. You gnaw on jerky tough enough to double as armor and sip tea that tastes like boiled regret. Some nights you huddle with your caravan mates not out of camaraderie, but because hypothermia is a team sport now. Your breath fogs in front of you. Your thoughts crawl. You start to suspect your kidneys have ghosted the rest of your organs. Even the animals struggle up here. Your camel shockingly fares better than you, but it moves slower, grumbles louder, and has started eyeing you with something dangerously close to judgment. If you brought pack goats or yaks for the narrower paths, they do slightly better, but they still slip-stumble, or just plop down and refuse to budge. When that happens, you unload them by hand on a cliff's edge in a snowstorm, with fingers that barely work. You don't cry. There's no moisture left in your body to spare. Sometimes you pass other travelers' caravans heading the opposite way. Their faces are as gaunt and hollow as yours. You swap a few words if you share a language, or just nod if you don't. Nobody lingers. The mountains don't reward dawdling. There are shrines up here, 2 small piles of stones or weathered prayer flags tied to dead branches. Travelers leave offerings, coins, trinkets, scraps of cloth. It's not about religion, it's desperation. At this altitude, you'll beg any god who will listen, even ones invented by some guy 3 towns back. You start losing track of time. Every pass looks like the last. Every rock formation feels familiar. You wonder if you're circling. You check your map, a crumpled scroll offering about as much guidance as a drunken rumor. You trust your guide not because he inspires confidence, but because you lack the mental energy to doubt him. You just keep moving one foot in front of the other until the path finally slopes downward. Descending doesn't feel like victory. It feels like being spat out. Your chest expands again. You take deep, greedy breaths. Real air floods your lungs. You taste it like food. Your body slowly thaws. Your fingers twitch back to life. Your camel spits on your boots just to remind you who's really in charge. But you made it. You're not stronger, just colder, thinner, and a little more broken. And somewhere ahead, waiting for your battered little caravan, is the next circle of Silk Road hell. You should probably savor this brief moment of oxygen. It won't last. The mountains taught you another lesson about the Silk Road. Nothing here is built for human comfort. Everything's a challenge, an obstacle. Another way for the world to remind you that you don't belong. But you survived, and that's got to count for something. Even if that something is just the knowledge that you're tougher than you thought, and the Silk Road is crueler than you could have imagined. If the terrain doesn't kill you, the people probably will. That's the golden rule of surviving the Silk Road. Never assume you're safe just because the landscape's done trying to eat you alive. You've escaped the desert's dehydration marathon, and the mountain's slow suffocation. But now, it's time for the next leg of your journey. The part where someone smiles, distracts you with kind words, and then relieves you of everything but your regrets. Welcome to the thriving industry of robbery, bribery, and betrayal. If the Silk Road had a customer service desk, it'd come with a complimentary dagger. Bandits aren't the cartoonish villains you might expect, no scruffy guys in rags leaping from behind rocks. Sometimes they're the friendly locals who ride alongside your caravan for a day, sharing dried apricots only to sneak back at night to swipe your camels. Other times they're an unofficial toll station, a polite term for an organized gang charging passage fees and enforcing refusal with pointy objects. Some even wear uniforms. You'll get fleeced by guys claiming to be soldiers, officials, tax collectors, or religious enforcers. Some might even be legit, which doesn't make it any better. You think your caravan's ready, right? You've got guards 2, maybe 3 if your budget's stretched that far. Too bad guards are expensive, disloyal, and often hired from the same town as the folks trying to rob you. It's not uncommon for a caravan to get ambushed only for the guards to miss the warning signs, or worse, join in. And if you manage to fend off one band of thieves, don't pop the champagne. Word spreads. Now you're the caravan worth the effort. Next time they'll bring friends. Even without outright attacks, corruption's your daily shadow. Every checkpoint, and there are so many, is a fresh chance to lose money, patience, or both. City guards will inspect your goods and find problems you didn't know existed: a missing trade permit, a banned spice, a religious text in the wrong language. These are usually fixed by slipping a few silver coins into the right palm. Too little, and they confiscate your best stuff. Too much, and you're on every corrupt official's generous idiot list. It's a delicate art, and you'll never quite master it. Then there's betrayal from within. Your caravan isn't a family, it's a shaky alliance held together by profit and fear, both of which erode faster than your trust. You start noticing things go missing: a coin pouch here, a silk bolt there. Someone swears they saw a thief sneak into camp, but you suspect it's the same guy who always volunteers for watch, and then mysteriously dozes off. Fights break out, tempers flare, suspicion spreads. You start sleeping with one eye open and a hand on your money belt, which now mostly holds lint and disappointment. Paranoia becomes a survival skill. You learn not to share too much about your route, goods, or destination. Questions that once seemed friendly now feel loaded. A merchant asks which city you're heading to. Are they chatting or planning to beat you there and undercut your prices? Your guide mentions a shortcut. Is it efficient or a setup for a scenic ambush? You start squinting at everyone, including your own reflection. And don't forget politics. The Silk Road cuts through dozens of territories, each with its own laws, rulers, and grudges. Some are at war officially or not, and travelers like you are fair game. Your caravan might fly a flag from one city only to learn it's banned in the next, or worse, belongs to their sworn enemy. Suddenly, you're not just a merchant, you're a spy, a smuggler, or a moral degenerate, depending on which holy man's shouting loudest. And if you thought gate guards were bad, wait till you meet the tax inspectors inside. All this makes trust a luxury you can't afford. Every interaction's a gamble. Every relationship's a contract with invisible fine print. You get good at polite vagueness, strategic silence, and smiling just long enough to clear the next checkpoint. You learn to hide valuables in multiple spots, not that it'll help when you're tied to a tree without shoes. You stop asking questions when someone from your caravan vanishes overnight. You pretend not to notice when two merchants quietly rearrange each other's camel packs. And yet, somehow trade keeps chugging along, because despite the theft bribes and backstabbing, there's still profit to be made if you survive. If you keep enough goods and enough sanity. The Silk Road isn't fair. It was never meant to be. It's a sprawling web of opportunity built on the bones of the unlucky and the naive. And now you're part of it. Just another merchant walking the line between commerce and chaos, hoping the next stranger you meet wants your spices, not your blood. Even the cities you reach for trade aren't as safe as they look. Sure, they've got walls, towers, and gates, but they also have complex social hierarchies. You don't understand, and unwritten rules you've already broken by opening your mouth. You might get fined for wearing the wrong color, bowing at the wrong angle, or accidentally staring at someone's wife. Each city has its own taboos, and learning them is an expensive game of trial and error, mostly error. Even language is a trap. You think you're saying hello, but you've just said, Your mother smells like rotten fish. Your translator tries to smooth things over, but the damage is done. Now you're the rude foreigner, and your price is just doubled. Then there are the middlemen guys calling themselves facilitators who promise to navigate the local system. They know all the right officials, they say. They can save you from unnecessary fees. They just need a small cut for their trouble. By day's end, you've paid your facilitator more than all the fees he swore he'd help you dodge, and your goods are still stuck in the city warehouse awaiting further processing. The truth is, on the Silk Road, everyone's a potential enemy until proven otherwise. And even then, you keep a hand on your purse. Trust is a luxury you can't afford, and paranoia is a survival tool you can't live without. In the end, you learn the Silk Road's greatest danger isn't the deserts or mountains, it's the people. And the only way to survive is to become a little more like them every day, less trusting, less generous, less naive. You adapt, you learn, and you become the person you need to be to make it through. If you're lucky enough to reach your destination with some goods and sanity intact, you'll look back and realize the Silk Road changed you in ways you never expected. It didn't just take your goods, your money, or your health. It took a piece of your soul and replaced it with something tougher, colder, and far less trusting. And maybe in the cutthroat world of the Silk Road, that's exactly what you need to survive. After weeks of blistered feet, half-frozen fingers, camel fart fumes, and the creeping certainty your bones are fusing from malnutrition, you see it. A city, a real one, not some wind-battered outpost or a caravanserai with 2 cracked wells and a bitey goat. A proper city with towers, gates, rooftops, a skyline that doesn't make you question your sanity. Maybe it's Constantinople, Baghdad, or Chang'an. Doesn't matter. What matters is you've survived long enough to smell humanity again. Spoiler. Humanity smells like sewage spices and crushed dreams. You roll toward the gates on wobbly wheels, your breath caught between hope and a mild case of bronchitis. You're expecting a hero's welcome. You get bureaucracy. The entry line's so long you suspect some of these travelers have aged and died in place. Guards in shiny armor who've seen more parades than battles inspect every cart like it's hiding treason wrapped in saffron. They check your papers. They check your camels. They ask if you're carrying weapons-banned texts or ill intentions. You try to smile, but your lips are so cracked it feels like tearing parchment. Finally, they wave you through, not because they trust you, nobody trusts anybody, but because their shift's almost over and the guards have better places to be. You shuffle through the gates, your caravan coughing and groaning like a half-dead beast, and step into a real city. That's when you realize civilization isn't a blessing. It's an avalanche of noise filth and desperate commerce. You dreamed of arrival, of striding into a glittering world where gold dust floats in the air and baths await the weary. Instead, you're hit with the stench of unwashed bodies, open sewers, fried meat, and something that might have once been fish. The streets are chaos. Merchants yell. Kids dart underfoot. A guy in a stained tunic hurls a basket of eels into your path. Someone accuses your camel of blasphemy. You haven't even found a place to crash, and you've already been shoved, overcharged, and sneezed on by a monk. You stumble toward the market, or rather the crowd sweeps you there. Your arrival you think will mean profit, respect, validation. Instead, you find saturation. Dozens of caravans beat you here, hauling silk so fine it shimmers like oil, and spices so fragrant your pepper smells like mold. You lay out your goods cloth rolls, a few carefully preserved garments, maybe a trinket you were told was highly desirable. A buyer glances over, then moves on. Apparently your stuff looks better under dust and optimism. Haggling begins, or tries to. You name a price that once made sense. They laugh. You name a lower one. They yawn. Soon you're offering silk for less than the cost of your own underwear, and still getting told it's overpriced. You sell a sack of cinnamon for 2 copper coins and an apology. You trade a brass clasp for half a loaf and a shrug. A guy offers a single boiled onion for your entire stock of beads. You nearly take it, not because it's a good deal, but because it's the first hot thing you've seen in 3 weeks. You console yourself with thoughts of rest, maybe a warm room, a real bed, the miracle of a bath. Then you meet the city's rental market. Inns are packed. Private rooms are a myth. The cheapest bunk costs more than your camel, and comes with 6 roommates, 2 rats, and a philosophical debate about whether lice count as divine punishment. You end up in a narrow loft above a money changer's shop. The roof leaks, the mattress has fleas, and the walls are so thin you learn way too much about your neighbor's digestive habits. To sell legally here, you need papers, permits, stamps, endorsements, maybe a minor miracle. The city's clerks are either missing napping or hidden behind layers of bureaucracy so thick they need translators. Every document costs money. Every office charges a fee. Every fee requires another signature, which means another line. You start missing the simplicity of bribes. At least bandits rob you quickly. By the time your permits are approved, the market's shifted again. Prices have tanked. Demand's dried up. You're told this week's trend is indigo and your goods are the wrong shade. You consider screaming. Instead, you sit quietly on a rug that smells like garlic and failure, trying to look dignified while selling the last of your cloth to a guy who openly admits he'll resell it for double. Then comes the worst realization: you have to decide what's next. Do you stay in this city scraping by among strangers, speaking 6 dialects and trusting none of them? Or do you turn around and trudge the whole cursed road in reverse, older, thinner, half-broken, and no more welcome than when you arrived? Even the food here tests your endurance. The aromas from food stalls are enough to make you forget every hardship you've endured: grilled lamb, honeyed pastries, spiced stews, fried dumplings, flatbread still steaming from the tandoor. You tell yourself one bite won't hurt. One roasted apricot later, you're in a public latrine praying for death. Mongol-era cities have thriving food cultures and zero grasp of germ theory. You chug hot tea obsessively, not for the taste, but because boiled water's your last defense against your own intestines. Housing's a nightmare naturally. The city's overcrowded. Merchants snore like war drums. One guy insists he fought a snow leopard barehanded. You find a spot in a shared room above a candle shop that smells like rancid fat and regret. You sleep in your clothes, stuff your coin pouch under your shirt, and keep one hand on your knife and the other on your shoes. Trust is for locals. And while you're juggling trade cuisine and digestive trauma, local politics quietly sharpen their knives. Mongol governors love to seem friendly. They smile. They allow religious freedom. They let merchants move relatively safely, but they also tax like it's a competitive sport, plant informants in every tea house, and occasionally execute a guest just to remind the room who's boss. Trade's good, but your presence is tolerated for now. You leave the market not triumphant, but upright. You made a few deals. You avoided robbery, arrest poisoning, or marriage. You're only moderately ill. You're slightly richer, marginally wiser, and significantly more constipated. The city's given you stories, goods, and probably a new parasite. And now the road's calling again, that long, dusty, cursed corridor stretching toward another disaster. You adjust your pack blink at your camel and keep walking, because that's what merchants do until they don't. But before you go, you take a moment to glance back at this city that promised so much and delivered so little. The towers still gleam in the sun. The sounds of trade and life still rise from the streets. And for a second you remember why you started this journey. Not for gold or glory, though, both would have been nice. For something slipperier, a chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. To weave worlds, ideas, and people together in ways never done before. To be a thread in the vast web of human understanding and commerce. Then your camel spits on your boots and the moment passes. You head for the road, the horizon, the whatever's waiting out there. You don't know what you'll find. You're not sure you want to. But you go anyway because that's what the Silk Road demands. Not courage, not wisdom, but persistence, the ability to keep walking when every step hurts. Every choice is wrong, and every day brings a new challenge designed to break your spirit. And as you vanish into the dust and heat, the city hums on behind you. Other merchants will come. They'll have the same hopes, the same dreams, the same illusions about what awaits them on the Silk Road. And they'll learn the same lessons you did, that the road takes more than it gives. that survival is the only success that matters, and that sometimes it's still worth it. So the Silk Road endures eternal and inevitable swallowing the dreams and ambitions of those who dare to tread its dusty length, and you for now are one of them. You thought the desert's mountains and trap-filled cities were the Silk Road's biggest challenges. Oh, how wrong you were. The real test is right beside you every day, sharing your campfire, sipping your water, and occasionally trying to sell you to bandits for a handful of coins. Your caravan companions aren't just strangers. They're a walking soap opera of secret schemes and questionable morals, tied together by necessity and some grubby rope. Let's start with your guide, a guy of indeterminate age, with eyes that have seen too much and a smile that never quite reaches them. He calls himself Rashid, or maybe Hassan, or whatever name he thinks sounds coolest that day. He claims he's trekked this road 20 times, knows every water source from here to Samarkand, and can negotiate with any tribe in their native tongue. But you notice things. The way he hesitates when someone asks about a specific route, the way he peeks at the map when he thinks no one's watching, and, most unsettling, the way he keeps a dagger hidden in his sleeve that he thinks you haven't spotted. Rashid Hassan might have traveled this road before, but maybe not as a guide, maybe as something a lot sketchier. Then there's the translator, a curly-haired kid named Dimitri, who claims to speak 7 languages fluently and grasped the spirit of 12 more. Dimitri's got a charming grin and an uncanny knack for turning, "We'd like to buy silk into, your wife has a waist like a fine young mare." You're starting to suspect half the cultural mishaps your caravan stumbles into aren't accidents. Dimitri has a weird habit of vanishing right when negotiations get heated, only to reappear hours later with vague tales of seeking help. You wonder if help is code for whoever's paying more. Next up, the caravan's doctor, if you can call him that without snorting. Hakim claims he trained at Baghdad's finest medical schools, but his treatments mostly involve staring at your symptoms, shaking his head sagely, and telling you to drink more water. To be fair, that's solid advice on the Silk Road, but when you show up with an open wound, and he suggests balancing your humors with a mix of powdered rhino horn and blueberry leaves, you question his credentials. What really freaks you out isn't Hakim's bizarre remedies, it's how much he knows about poisons, and how little he knows about antidotes. When someone in the caravan gets mysteriously sick, Hakim's always got a detailed theory about the cause, usually tied to food, from a rival merchant he's conveniently feuding with over herb sales. The caravan's cook Omar works miracles with a handful of rice, some jerky, and whatever weeds he finds by the roadside. He's got a cheery demeanor rare on the Silk Road and a bizarre ability to keep spirits high even when rations dwindle and folks start eyeing the camels with hungry glints. But Omar's hiding something. You catch it one night when you wake up to pee and spot him carefully measuring something from a tiny vial into tomorrow's soup pot. When you ask, he says it's a special spice to keep the food from spoiling. But the way he hurriedly hides the vial and avoids your gaze makes you wonder if it's spice or something more sedative. Omar knows more about food chemistry than most doctors know about medicine, and in a caravan where tempers can flare into violence, a cook who keeps everyone slightly drowsy and docile is a sneaky MVP. The other merchants come with their own baggage. There's Ahmad, a silk trader from Damascus who boasts about carrying the finest bolts from his workshops. But you've noticed his silk rolls never get opened for inspection, and he gets twitchy whenever someone suggests a peek. One night, when Ahmad thinks everyone's asleep, you catch him carefully unrolling one and checking inside. Instead of silk, you glimpse papers, documents of some kind. Ahmad's no silk merchant. He's a courier, and whatever he's smuggling is important enough to risk his neck on the Silk Road. Then there's Fatima, one of the few women in the caravan who says she's heading to Bukhara to reunite with family. Fatima handles camels better than most of the men haggles in 3 languages, and carries a jewelry collection she calls her dowry. But you've seen how checkpoint guards look at her not with the interest men give a pretty traveler, but with recognition. And the way she always knows the exact bribe amount needed at each stop, like she's run these routes a dozen times. Fatima might be visiting family, but you'd bet your last coin that's not her only mission. The guards, Sergei and Mikhail, are brothers from the northern steppes who say they served in the Mongol army before going mercenary. They definitely know their way around a sword and aren't shy about violence. But you've noticed how they whisper to each other, always clamming up when someone gets close. One night you overhear them arguing in their language. You don't catch the words, but the tone's clear. They're bickering over some kind of plan. The way they glance at the other merchants in the firelight makes you wonder if they're here to protect the caravan or for something else entirely. Even the seemingly harmless folks have secrets. Pietro, a cheery merchant from Genoa, is always ready to share wine and stories, but you've clocked how he asks questions. Always clever, always indirect about other trade routes, prices in different cities, local politics. Pietro might just be a curious trader, but the info he's gathering sounds like the kind a government would pay handsomely for. And then there's Brother Francis, the Nestorian monk, who says he's on a pilgrimage. He spends his days praying, tending the sick, and preaching peace and understanding. He also knows a suspiciously detailed amount about siege weapons and military tactics for a man of God. When the caravan hits trouble, Brother Francis is always first with tactical advice, and it's always eerily spot on. As weeks pass, you realize the caravan isn't just a group of traders traveling for safety. It's a nest of spies, couriers, fugitives, and con artists, each with their own agenda, each watching the others like hawks, each waiting for the right moment to pull off their real goal. And the scariest part, you start wondering what they think of you. You told them you're a simple merchant, but do they buy it? Or do they think you're hiding something too? The truth is, on the Silk Road, nobody's what they seem. Everyone's got a second story, a hidden motive, a reason for being here they can't share. As the caravan trudges through unforgiving terrain, it also navigates a landscape of deception and suspicion just as deadly. You learn to watch, to listen for what's unsaid, to read meaning in glances and gestures. You learn to share just enough to keep up the pretense of camaraderie, but not enough to put yourself at risk. And slowly you realize this might be the Silk Road's greatest lesson in a world where survival means never fully trusting anyone. How do you hold on to enough humanity to make the journey worthwhile? It's a question you're still grappling with as the caravan presses on into the heart of the unknown. You thought surviving deserts, mountains, bandits, and sketchy caravan mates meant you'd seen the worst the Silk Road could throw at you. Oh, how gloriously wrong you were. Just as your caravan settles into a deceptively calm valley, the ground starts to shake. Not a gentle tremble like a camel's stomp. This is a deep primal lurch, as if the earth's trying to shrug everything off its back, like a giant, furiously annoyed dog. Earthquakes on the Silk Road don't send polite RSVPs. They're sudden, violent, and have a wicked sense of humor. One minute, you're by the campfire arguing over who swiped the last crust of bread. The next, you're flailing to stay upright as the world turns into a giant wobble board. Your camels react the only way they know how, screaming with a volume and intensity that suggests they've just received deeply personal bad news from the cosmos. They also bolt in random directions, often with your precious cargo still strapped to their backs. You learn a valuable lesson. Nothing says fun like chasing a panicked camel through falling rocks, while the ground under you tries to audition as a liquid. The worst part of an earthquake isn't the shaking, it's the aftermath. Landslides block the paths you need to keep moving. Streams get rerouted or vanish entirely, leaving your water plans based on geography that no longer exists. And sometimes cracks open in the earth, swallowing everything from caravan gear to unlucky caravan members who stood in the wrong spot at the wrong time. That's when you learn to dig not for treasure, but to claw back what you need to survive from the rubble. And you learn to count heads fast because a mismatched tally is always bad news. Then there are plagues. Not the usual colds or traveler's diarrhea you've grudgingly accepted. We're talking real-deal diseases that spread through the caravan like gossip and kill with far more efficiency. You wake up one morning to find 3 people coughing blood into their sleeves and pretending it's no big deal. By noon, it's 6. By nightfall, half the caravan's bleeding from places blood shouldn't be, and the other half's seriously considering ditching the sick and sprinting the other way. The problem with plagues on the Silk Road is there's no hospital nearby. The nearest one's hundreds of miles off through the same brutal terrain. You barely survived when healthy. So you do what you can with what you've got, which is mostly hope prayers, and trying not to breathe the same air as the dying. Your Dr. Hakim suddenly gets very interested in walking at the front of the caravan, and his remedies grow weirder and more desperate. He suggests burning everything the sick have touched, including their camels. When someone points out this would leave the caravan without transport, he muses that maybe some sacrifices are needed for the greater good. That's when you start suspecting Hakim's not the doctor you want in a medical crisis. Then there's the weather, not the usual annoying kind you're used to, but phenomena that feel scripted by a deity with a cruel sense of humor and an unlimited special effects budget. Hail the size of chicken eggs drops from a clear sky. Sand tornadoes rage for hours, burying the caravan so deep you have to dig for your camels. Lightning hits the same spot 3 times in a row, like the sky's got a personal grudge against that particular rock. And then there are storms that seem to defy physics. Winds blow from 2 directions at once. Rain falls upward. Snow shows up in the middle of a desert, not a few flurries, but a full-on blizzard with 0 visibility and bone-chilling cold. Your caravan spends 3 days huddled under every scrap of fabric you can find, sharing breath for warmth, and wondering if you accidentally ticked off the weather gods. When the storm finally clears, you emerge to a landscape that's been completely redrawn. Landmarks you used for navigation, gone. Water sources you counted on frozen solid. And somewhere in the distance you hear wolves howling, sounding both surprised and delighted by the sudden weather plot twist. But scarier than natural disasters are the things you can't explain. Noises at night that don't come from any animal you recognize. Lights dancing on the horizon with no visible source. Shadows of things that aren't there cast on the ground under a full moon. And the voices. Always the voices. They start late on the second night after the blizzard. A faint, whispery voice, barely audible, over the wind calling caravan members' names. At first, everyone laughs it off, blaming the wind or overactive imaginations. But then, Dmitri the translator gets up in the middle of the night and starts walking into the desert eyes, blank a creepy smile plastered on his face. It takes 3 people to drag him back to the campfire, and he fights the whole way, insisting his mother's calling, and he has to go to her. Dmitri's mother died 10 years ago. The next night, it's Ahmad the silk merchant, then Fatima. Each night, the voices get louder, clearer, more persuasive, and each night it gets harder to stop people from wandering into the dark. Brother Francis the monk declares you're being tested by demons, and starts performing increasingly elaborate exorcism rituals. Hakim insists it's collective poisoning from something you ate, and begins obsessively analyzing every meal from the past week. Omar the cook goes eerily quiet and starts adding even more special spice to the food. But the guards Sergei and Mikhail have another theory. They say their homeland has tales of desert spirits entities that live in the wastelands and feed on memories and desires. The only way to fend them off, they claim, is to never walk alone, never trust what you hear in the dark, and always keep cold iron close. You start noticing things you brushed off before. The way shadows shift in the firelight even when nothing's casting them. The way camels stare at empty spots and refuse to move. The way the air chills a few degrees whenever someone starts talking about home. And you wonder if the Silk Road stories you heard captured the whole truth. Stories of caravans vanishing without a trace, of cities found empty with food still warm on tables and no signs of struggle, of travelers found sitting at perfect campfires dead with smiles on their faces and eyes fixed on something no one else could see. Maybe you think there are dangers on the Silk Road no map can warn you about, things that live in the gaps between the known and the possible, feeding on the loneliness and desperation the road breeds in everyone who dares to walk it. As you lie in your bedroll, listening to the wind and praying the voices don't know your name, You realize the Silk Road isn't just a physical gauntlet. It's a psychological, spiritual, maybe even metaphysical one. And the winner isn't always the strongest or smartest. Sometimes it's just the one who can hold on to their sanity long enough to see the dawn. Against all odds, you've made it. You've survived soul-crushing deserts, breath-stealing mountains, sticky-fingered bandits, corrupt officials, plagues, natural disasters, and even kept your marbles when eerie voices whispered your name in the night. Your caravan's finally reached its destination, or at least a place safe enough to sit and ponder what in the world just happened. You look back on the months, maybe years, time's a blurry mess when every day's a survival slog, and try to make sense of what you've learned. First off, those romantic Silk Road tales, total bunk. This wasn't a grand adventure through magical lands. It was an endurance test disguised as a trade route with extra camel spit for flavor. But something weird happened along the way. Somewhere between your camel's first snotty projectile and the 100th time you wondered if the stew was poisoned, you changed. Not into the hero or legendary explorer you might have hoped for, but something trickier and maybe more valuable, a survivor. You've learned humans can adapt to the unthinkable. You once thought sleeping on hard ground would kill you. Now you can nap on jagged rocks and wake up feeling vaguely human. You used to gag at metallic-tasting water. Now you're grateful for anything not swarming with algae or larvae. You've mastered reading people in ways your old life never required. A glance can tell you if someone's planning to rob you blind. A smile can hide a dagger. Silence is often the smartest answer to any question. Most importantly, you've learned about persistence, not the heroic kind from epic poems, but the boring day-to-day grind of just keeping on. Keeping on when your feet are blistered raw. Keeping on when your stomach's a howling void. Keeping on when every instinct screams to lie down and let the vultures take over. This kind of persistence doesn't get ballads, but it's the stuff that builds worlds. Looking at your remaining caravan mates, those who haven't ditched died, or been traded for a sack of onions, you realize you've shared something rare. Not just a journey, but a transformation. Each of you is different from when you started. Tougher in some ways, softer in others. Less naive, but maybe wiser. Rashid, or whatever his name is, the Shady guide, has become something like a friend, if you can be friends with someone you don't fully trust. Dimitri, the translator, now decodes intentions as well as words. Omar the cook is an artist conjuring meals from dust and dreams. Even Hakim the doctor found redemption by actually helping people, though his methods still raise eyebrows. You realize this might be the Silk Road's true treasure. Not silk spices or gold, though those are nice, but people. People forged by hardship into something stronger, more flexible than they were at the start. The Silk Road is a machine for crafting humans who can do the impossible. People who can bridge worlds because they've survived the edges. People who can negotiate because they know everyone's got something to lose. People who adapt because they had to, or they'd be bones in the sand. This is why the Silk Road matters beyond trade. It's about creating a new kind of person, someone who can live in multiple worlds at once, who can carry ideas from one place to another, not just because they know the roots, but because they are the roots. Sure, plenty never made it. The Silk Road's littered with graves of those who weren't lucky tough, or just standing in the wrong spot when the earth cracked open. For every success story like yours, there's a dozen that end in scattered bones or frozen corpses on a mountain pass. But those who survive become something extraordinary. Living bridges between civilizations, carrying math from India to Europe, engineering from China to the Middle East, philosophy from Greece to Central Asia. They don't just haul goods, they haul possibilities. In doing so, they create something bigger than the sum of its parts, a network of connection, understanding, and commerce spanning a continent and lasting centuries, something tough enough to outlive collapsing empires, wars, plagues, and disasters. The Silk Road was never just about getting from point A to point B. It was about becoming the kind of person who could survive anywhere from A to Z. Now sitting here, still alive, mostly sane, you're part of that legacy. Proof that humans can overcome anything with enough grit, adaptability, and dumb luck. You're one of the few who can say, I walked the Silk Road and lived to tell the tale. That tale might not be what you expected when you started. No heroes, no glory, no treasure chests. But it's got something better truth. Truth about what humans can endure, what they can learn, and what they can become when pushed beyond what they thought possible. As you stand to continue your journey, because there's always another journey, another horizon, you carry the Silk Road's final biggest lesson: the journey never really ends. It just morphs into something else. You might leave the Silk Road, but it never leaves you. It's part of who you are, your story, how you see the world, and your place in it. Maybe that's the whole point, not to reach a specific place, but to become a specific kind of person. Someone who can face a desert, a mountain, or a strange city and say, "Not I can't, but I'll figure it out." Someone who can build bridges between worlds. And that's the end of our slow, grueling trek through the Silk Road, a trade network promising riches but mostly delivering lessons in human endurance, the value of adaptability, and the fact that the greatest journeys change you in ways you never saw coming. Thanks for joining us on this dusty, camel-scented slog through history. If you enjoyed this sleep-inducing tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where would you have tapped out. On the Silk Road, the desert, the mountains, or the second you smelled that first camel fart. Sleep tight and catch you next time for another historical adventure that'll hopefully involve fewer cranky mammals spitting in your face. Plenty more wild history stories await us.